First, the last exercise, we created a simple HTML design, so a table could be populated dynamically. So this is what we created. Of course, we slightly skinned it, different color. So the major problem of this design was the data is not persisted. So once I refresh, things are going away. And morning we saw what is local storage. So we found a solution to store the data. Now we have to connect both. So a consolidated data such as an object or array of object, how it could be saved, that we are going to see. I'm going to customize this particular data type so that it can be used uh, for this exercise. So let's see how it is possible. Before that, there is a difference between an object declaring and object representing. For example, is an object being declared, initialized, and but I can see and find out, okay, it looks like a string. Uh, this is also a string, but maybe putting a hyphen or a special character doesn't make any difference as long as things are within the quotation. But I want to treat this string as a two individual string. Mean I want to extract the first name and the last name from this particular string. So in this case, this object is of type string, even though it has some sort of notation in place. I may go ahead and say, hey, you can get back your first name and last name if you try to eliminate the hyphen. So hyphen separate the first name and last name. So this is my notation, maybe my understanding. So if I want to retrieve the data, so maybe I can give a name. What name? There is an option in split in JavaScript. This JavaScript, the function called split, can split the string with some sort of condition what you put. In this case, I'm going to give a kind of hyphen to split the string. Wherever the hyphen is found, the string would be splitted accordingly. The result value would be stored in an array. The response after executing a split will always be in an array. So now I can type sorry. It means after splitting the string, I will get array. Naturally, the array is going to have two values because splitting the string is going to give me two sets. Not set, of course, two individual data. So that could be retrieved by iterating over it. Since I know it already, I'm manually iterating instead of putting a for loop or anything else. So when I run the source code of this particular file, you see, I noticed this two strings splitted, and of course I see them one by one. And the code immediately started running because I defined everything in the global space. It is not inside any function, so that the action triggered, the function starts working. As the DOM started loaded, this particular code would start working, and in fact is some sort of a local value, even though a string, but I converted into an array in this case. by having a particular condition stating the split. So a notation is nothing but a user defined representation of a data so that the data could be extracted from it by applying some conditions. So in this case, hyphen pretty simple, but this kind of notation may not be so effective because I don't know. For example, in this case, Vasudev hyphen Kumaran, or maybe some numbers, some math, some sort of pass. If I notice, by splitting them, I can get back the individual data such as first name, last name, maybe roll number and subject, or maybe the status, whether the pass or fail. But it is very difficult for me to identify what kind of a data type should be matched to which kind of representation, because I'm not sure like the first one is a first name always, the second one is a second name always, because this particular notation does not give me a much information about how this string could be represented, maybe further could be used. For that, we may have to slightly give a complex option, maybe. It looks like something is understandable by seeing it, but of course it's going to give me a tough time because as I split using hyphen, I will end up getting maybe I think a spelling mistake. I'll be getting some additional information also, but I just want to get, okay, first name mean this one, last name mean this one. So I need to further split the string, the result string, with a kind of a colon in place, and then I retrieve the first name. So, but of course, a kind of a formatted string like this would help me to identify the specific data type and retrieve and match with the some condition according to me whatever I have. So this kind of techniques are called notation, representation. Even though it is a string, but by applying some condition, I can extract some additional information from the string. And of course, that could be set to a different UI. For example, if I have a form, I can display the first name in first field, the second field may display the second last name, the third one roll number, subject. Even though it is a single string, the way I represent makes it a different or complex data type. And this strategy I'm going to use for converting a JavaScript array to a string and save it into a local storage, and then retrieve back the same data and reconvert it back to a JavaScript array. Then I use it in my HTML code. But in this case, this is a user defined notation, meaning it's my own rules and regulation. But we need to standardize instead of having our own representation. Such a standard way of representing data is now we popularly called JSON. So a kind of a JavaScript object notation. A JavaScript object notation typically start with a curly brace. I just commented, don't take that as an important thing. But of course, a JavaScript notation always start with the uh, curly brace. But I can say like JSON, some name. It will be appropriate to write like this. First thing, it is a standard one. Documents are available. What kind of standard it follows, but it's pretty simple. I'll explain now itself. A JavaScript object notation, popularly we call it JSON. An object always wrapped within the curly brace. An array is wrapped within the square box. How? It is a simple representation of JSON. Remember, it is a string still because with this, which is within the quotation. But what I have done is within the curly brace, I defined a key and value look like, but in fact, it is everything within the JSON, and it is separated by comma. Now, how I can get back the data? There is an object called JSON which is available. It is also an instance of a predefined class, and there is a method called parse. Send your string object inside. With one single line, your JSON would have been read and it is being converted as a normal JavaScript object. Now we already saw what kind of object exists because an object can be represented using key value pairs. In fact, there is a key value exist. So now I'm going to type first name. No need of split, no need of iteration, uh, of course, unless it is required. With one single line, a string is converted into a specific JavaScript object. Now the object could be retrieved by simply specifying the key, and subsequent value could be retrieved from it. Something is going wrong here. Last. Okay. I need to do some more stuff here because usually JavaScript values defined within the quotation, and of course you may need to escape that string as well. Within the string, when you represent a string within the quotation you may need to add one more quotation. You may have to escape it using the slash. In this case, I'm escaping it. Now, first name within quotation, the word called Vasudev exists, and the last name within quotation, it does exist. Of course, still I'm getting it. Parse. First. See, I don't have problem here. First name, last name. Maybe this guy is not getting initialized. We will see. I'm going to put that inside the button. From here your debugging part starts. When you don't get an expected output, I put it inside a method because I am identifying the JSON object may not be ready because immediately invoking it may be a troublesome. But let's see if that fixes the issue. The error went away, but it will only trigger when the particular method is called, and of course unexpected token F first name. Maybe I also need to wrap it within the keyword. This also I'm going to put it within the quotation. Let me see if I can get a desired output. Okay. Got it. So typically a representation, of course, but if you don't want to have this kind of a scenario where you need to escape the particular string type, I may have one more way to fix that. Instead of escaping, using the single quotation to get rid of the escape part. We'll see whether it works or not. Okay, it works. The single quotation will make sure it doesn't collide with the double quotation which is used to represent the key and value, and you can simply forget about escaping it. But if you are using the double quotation where inside the double quotation is also needed, make sure you put the escape character and escape that particular thing so that it will be on board. In this case, your string, which is represented as a format given by JSON, is defined as if a key and value pairs, and this particular notation or representation start with a curly brace mean it is a JSON type, because JSON type an object always start with a curly brace. If an object is of type array, it will have a square bracket instead of the curly brace. So in this case, the first name and last name could be retrieved by simply parsing it and give the key and value, also specific key, and retrieve back the data. We don't need to use split and have it manually identify the data. It's pretty simple. So a simple representation of a string by the definition or guidelines given by JSON will help us to represent a complex data type. Even though if it is complex, we can define it as a simple string. So in this case, it is nothing but a string, but still it has two data like first name and last name. Now I'm going to do a few more techniques. I put a square bracket, mean I'm trying to represent, as far as JSON, I'm trying to represent an array. Arrays always will have a square box inside. So inside I can represent more set of data. For simple side, I'll simply define in this way. For better viewability. Okay, this, you really don't want the unnecessary stuff to confuse you. Now this particular JSON object wraps an array which has two set of data. Each set represent a single JSON object, and by iterating over it I can find the specific data. In this case, I need to modify my console output. Even though it is converted as a JSON object, first one I get a JSON array. So in this case, I may have got an array. So JSON object of the first one, first set, and in that I may have the first name. To represent the first one. Index always start with a 0, so I'm going to just print the last one. Done. So in this case, it is printing the second value, because the first set will have a 0th index. I wanted to print the second one. So right now, since there is a square box, the result JSON object would automatically be a type of JavaScript array. By iterating over the array, I can get back the individual items. So right now, a string, a simple string, by following the format defined by JSON, I can wrap a complex data type. I can simply represent it as a string, but still I can parse it so that I can extract the required data from it, as the JSON parser allows you to extract the data. But only thing you need to worry, check for symbols, for example curly brace or square box. If a square box is there, your result object type would be an array. If a curly brace exists, the result object type would be an object, JSON object, sorry, JavaScript object. Only two types are possible. Of course, that helps us to quickly learn about JSON as well. I'm going to use the JSON type quite often in this case. And of course, this is the way your corporate apps also using to represent the data, to send the data to a different platform in a JSON format. Previously, we were much dependable on XML. XML also can do on represented data within the nodes and child, but representing using a JSON makes the parsing quite easy, and it is quite lightweight as well, and it's been widely used nowadays. The only thing, the key and value should be enclosed within the quotation. So I use a single quotation to grouply represent the string type. But if you want to use the double quotation to refer the string type, make sure you escape the characters used within that. That example also is there. I just commented. Whatever way suitable, you can use it. But this is a manual representation. I am not going to manually do everything. I'll be using JavaScript array directly convert into a JSON type, and of course a JSON type could be directly converted as a JavaScript or JavaScript array. So let's see that how it is possible. Few things I need to adjust. I'll keep this part active. The rest of the part I will be programmatically do it. Need to slightly reorganize the code. For a good object-oriented programming developer, he won't have a repeatable block quite often. Mean a method would not have the same code repeated again and again. So whereas he will split the code into small chunks, reuse it wherever required. So I'm going to modularize this code also, because I feel some of the part would get repeated quite often. I'm going to have a global object called, this is for students, right? For your understanding, I'm going to say it as an array, because since JavaScript internally identify the primitivity of a particular data type, but sometimes we may not be knowing it, so I'm going to make it as a array, empty array to start with. While registering the student record, what I'm going to do, subject, okay, here also a couple of things we need to know. For adding an element to a JavaScript array, we use a method called javascript.push. Push mean will add an element to an array at the end. So it is similar to your JavaScript array list. You will use array list.add. So that will add a particular object at the end of your array list. Similar to it, here what we have, push. So JavaScript array.push mean it will add a element or particular data into an array. For example, in this case, first name. So what it will make sure in the students array, it will make sure the first name whatever you type which get added. So initially it is empty, so whatever value is getting added will be kept on added as the user click on the register button. But in fact, I don't want to have a single data like first name alone into an array. So what I need to do, I slightly do some other representation. JavaScript, the object, the key value does not need to be wrapped within the quotation, so I'm just going to be directly saying it. First I create a JavaScript object, mean I enclose all the data into a single object. You may notice the value whatever the user type would be there in the variable called first name. Remember there is an uppercase exists, so this is different, that is different. Make sure the first one is the green one is nothing but the key of a JavaScript object, and subsequent value would be set using the variable which is initialized here. So a single object is created with containing all the values, and finally that value would get pushed to a student object. So every time when a user types something, and of course he enter a prepare or maybe he populate a table, subsequently a JavaScript array will also have those values registered with that. In fact, we had to save it, but somehow I'm retaining the data into a JavaScript array. I'll let you know why I'm trying to do that. To verify whether it is added, I'm going to put a console log statement trying to output student array, maybe slightly object type, but we'll try to see whether it is registered inside the JavaScript array. So I'm going to do it and verify. The previous two just discarded because for tested we use. So in this case, I'm going to use. You will notice an object. There are a couple of unnecessary parts are there, but at least we'll just try to expand it. I do notice there is an object reside first name with the values whatever I typed. I'm trying to enter another one. This time two object exist. First object which is already there, the second object it contains. So it means every data whatever I'm typing, so it's being populated inside a JavaScript array. So we'll see them why we are doing it. Of course, I'm also going to do a couple of other techniques. I'm going to write one more function because some sort of redundant code I want to move it to another block. Prepare a table. Something we can do it in this way. Maybe I can insert table. Table cell, I'll do it instead of that. I'll move it to another block. So now the first name, last name instance are not there. So I'm going to call them as arguments here. It means whatever arguments comes, which will prepare a table cells for it, and of course add the cells. So instead of write in this case, I can call the function this way. So this function, whenever I call with certain argument, will add a table cell for me. So So I just moved the block to another part instead of having everything in one single method, because I am feeling this prepare table cell I will be calling for some other reason as well. So I kept it as a separate block. I'm calling the method wherever needed. Okay, but I'd like to verify whether things are working fine before adding an active code. It is always advisable to check on every block of major changes happened in your code so that it doesn't disturb. Or also you also identify if any error comes, you can prevent it in a very initial stage itself instead of having a confusion after adding so many lines of code. Okay, now I just moved that particular block alone to another block. Reason being, I'm going to need another method. I'm going to take a step to store the data into a student's record. Into a local storage. The students array is going to be, sorry, I need to convert the array into a string format. That is also pretty simple. JSON.stringify is a method exists. Any object type, a JavaScript object or JavaScript object or JavaScript array could be simply converted into a JSON formatted string by simply issuing this particular statement called JSON.stringify. Give your JavaScript array. So this one single line, the whole array would get converted into a string formatted. Of course, that too in a JSON notated of course a JSON formatted string would be created, and that would be stored in your local storage. Okay, it's getting stored. So in the initial stage, I need to make sure local storage if what do you call students record exist. Recreate the students array from local storage JSON. This time I need to convert the string which is coming from a local storage, parsing it. This init should be called the moment DOM is ready, so I'm going to call it on load. So what this particular block is going to do, when a page is ready, it will make sure, check the local storage, is there any data exists called students record. If it exists, get the data. Of course, the data is going to be in a JSON representation, so I need to make sure it is parsed so that I'll get back my students array. Okay, students array is nothing but a JavaScript array. From the students array, I need to recreate or rebuild the table if I have an array. I'm going to introduce one more block which is quite popular, for loop. I'm going to use an index called I 0, I less than students array length I plus plus. So start with the index 0 and it will iterate up to a length of your array and post increment. Now I need to prepare table cell. For your better visibility, I'll do the code according to this. Make sure the same key used to prepare the JSON object, first name, where is that? I'm rebuilding my data. First name, last name. Be careful of using the same key. So last name, roll number, subject. So I used everything. I extract the data and populate to an object. You can directly do that, but for your better clarity, I'm doing it one more time. And call the prepare table cell. Of course, first name, last name. So it is going to be called on the very top of your code. It will check whether the value is already there in the local storage. If it is there, convert it into a JavaScript array and iterate over the array and get back individual elements and will prepare the table for you in the very initial level itself. That's the purpose, because I am going to use the prepare table cell two times. That's why I moved it to another block or separate function instead of repeating the same code again and again. And also I need to make sure everything works perfect. Okay, it looks fine. This block make sure your array is get converted to a string, and this part will make sure your array is your string reconverted back to an array. So two part we have seen: JSON parse, JSON stringify. Two things we saw. JSON parse will do a conversion from string to array, whereas JSON stringify will make sure array is converted to a string. Two different things it's doing. So stringify is nothing but any type, if it is a JSON object or JSON array, will get converted to a string. The same would be reconverted back using JSON parse. Remember, since I am saving a JSON array, I am pretty sure it could be iterated. If you are saving JSON object alone, you don't need to iterate it, but the native or the requirement of this code, it has to be a JSON array. If you don't want to use or waste this data, you have one more way, by directly giving the value. That will be more easy and appropriate instead of wasting one object name. Anything gone wrong here. Okay. Instead, I can directly call them instead of wasting a first name object and cast it to a string and then call it here. I can directly do that. And code also will be looking more nice. Format it. Okay. So if everything goes well, my code should work. Before that, I open the inspect elements to see if any errors are there. Nothing is there. Okay. It registered. It's auto corrections. Okay. Now it registered, and time to check whether it is there always. Yes, it's there. If I refresh, the data doesn't disappear. I can notice I opened into some different instance of the browser. The data stays and it never goes away. If I close the Chrome and of course I go back and run it again, still there. So data is persisted, data is saved. Now it doesn't go away, and we don't have a problem of refreshing and whether the data goes away. No, it's always there. So what has really happened, let us see. Inspect elements, I'm going to resource tab, trying to see local storage, click on the server. If you notice, additional key got created called students record. If you notice, the data is saved in a JSON format, the same one which I previously manually created, which was automatically created in this case. The key and value pairs exist. If you see that it starts with a square bracket, and inside there is a curly brace exists, so an object exists, a first set of object, the second set of object also there. I think I can fully see it, but I can edit also here by clicking in the rest of the content we see. So representing a data into a JSON format helps me to convert a JavaScript object or array into a string format, and then that could be used to store the data in local storage, because as I told, local storage having a limitation of storing only a string or primitive data types alone. So now the data is formatted in such a way it could be saved in local storage, and of course I need to retrieve. After that I have to reconvert and populate it again. So in this example, I have effectively used a JSON object representation, and also I used JavaScript array. A JavaScript array, it's an indexed array, so that once it is initialized, I can initialize with the empty set of objects, and using push. Push is equivalent to add, and I have various options to manipulate students array. I mean an array. Using push, I can add a element at the end of an array. When you use the push, always will add a new element at the end of an array. So push could be used to insert an element to an array. Once the array is pushed with a new value, the local storage gets updated. Mean, I already told you, if a session storage, say, or local storage already contain a key, it will modify the existing data. So it will update with a new value, and of course the prepared table cell will simply, whatever the value you give it through an argument, will be populated to a cell, and of course it will be added. This part is only for UI purpose, and when the data is completely saved, I also need to have a initialize method, so that if any data which is already there, restore it back from the local storage. That could be called when body tag is fully loaded. So I'm calling it in onload. I'm calling that method, check if any value exists in local storage, retrieve it, reconvert the string into a array back, and iterate over it, and get back all the individual elements and recreate your table. Thus, this particular table always reside and the value never disappears. But having done this, I'm going to have a further requirement. Is there any way I can edit it? Is there any way I can delete it? Or is there any way I can, for example, index it or replace it with some other value, alter it? Maybe edit is also same. So I need to add a furthermore addition to this table. Whenever you represent a transaction table, the immediate requirement is always, when you give an option to insert it, why don't you give an option to update it? Why don't you give an option to delete it? So maybe my requirement is going to be slightly, it's going to increase now. So that part we may need to add it, but that I'll explain with the exclusive example on JavaScript array, because only I introduced what is JavaScript array even in the previous exercise. How to add an element to a JavaScript array, how to modify an existing element to a JavaScript array. Is there any way I can update or maybe change the index of an array? So those things we will see when we discuss about JavaScript array in detail. So that time I will add a capability to this particular table with ability to insert an item and update an item, of course deleting the item as well. So that part will make the particular code fully working with entire CRUD operation added. CRUD means create, retrieve, update, delete. So all the options we should give. Anyway, so far we are successful to define a local storage engine to this application. Now the data always remains in the memory. Uh, to overcome the limitation of local storage, I had to convert the data into a JSON notation or JSON representation. Or instead, hereafter I'm going to call convert into a JSON. That's what I'm going to call. So you need to understand JSON is not a primitive data type. It is not a data type at all. It is nothing but a string, but only a representation as defined by JSON documentation. So if you want to see what is JSON documentation, you can Google it and see how things been defined. But easy one is a JSON representation of an object will always contain a curly brace. JSON representation of an array will always contain a square box. So accordingly, you can perceive the result data type and retrieve the contents from the JSON notation. So that's it. Afternoon, I'll go through in detail with, or maybe if I get a time after your hands-on part over, I'll explain the ability of JavaScript arrays, and also I want to go back again to a UI part again. Maybe we already learned something on JavaScript. I have one exercise that you need to create a calculator layout, and you need to make it as a working calculator with the same simple arithmetic operation on board, like plus, addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. So an HTML calculator you need to create. That's going to be the next task. I'll give an input, I'll write a part of the code, and the rest I'll leave it for you to discuss and build your own JavaScript calculator. By doing that, we will also understand how to layout, because calculator layout should have a matrix format, right? You need to have a boxes neatly aligned. So for example, maybe a calculator will look like why don't you create the same application? The Google already has it, but I don't want this complex calculator. This is of course done using JavaScript, uh, but it has a very complex. But what I need is the simple format of a basic arithmetic operation with a different coloring for arithmetic keys and of course numbers. A simple calculator as it should work according to this. So something I did. It does some work. So similar thing you need to do. That would be part of our hands-on exercise. Maybe in the afternoon session we will continue. But before that, you have to complete exercises on local storage and make the previous exercise persistable, and learn something more on JSON, test it and see how things work, and make sure you write the code error free. If any errors or anything encounters, make sure you debug and check what exactly going wrong. Remember, I also encountered an issue here, so I followed some method to identify what may have gone wrong, because I wrote a JSON, I first thing did not work, and then I tried to see adding within quotation or escaping a string, and finally I overcome the error. So same thing, whenever you encountered a behavior, something which is not expected by your code, make sure you thoroughly debug and identify the issue. A true professionalism not only starts with writing an application, and of course it more talks on the ability to debug your application. So both forms of professionalism. So make sure you guys do that. I'll post this source code to a website, and of course if you have a time you can start your hands-on part now itself, and of course you can continue in the afternoon session as well.